So, Living Christian Podcast. I'm here with Mark Lewis, which, in my opinion, is an excellent example of someone who does great work for God in many different ways. I'm kind of let him tell his own story here, but I'll nutshell it first. Mark Lewis, I met about 4 years ago.
Probably about right.
About right, yeah. And he does work all over the world. He's involved in many different missionary organizations, and he also does a lot of work in the Bay Area for homeless outreach. Before we really get into detail about what you do now, I always like to find out a bit about your history.
You sure about that?
Sure. I am pretty sure about that. No, I always start with asking. You're a Christian now, but were you always Christian?
No. I don't know how much detail you want on that, but I was raised in. Mother was Catholic, Dad was pretty much agnostic, and we were, as people call, Creasters, right? Christmas and Easter church, and maybe a funeral or two in between, and did catechism and all that stuff. And when I was a real little kid. And that was my initial just introduction to Christianity as I know it today. And then in my mid-20s, actually it'll be 25 years this April 7th that
Wow.
Jesus got me. And so, wow, that's crazy. It's almost half my life now.
Yeah.
So, yep.
I've heard that sentence a lot from people like yourself who are on fire for God and who do a lot of work for God. Jesus got you. And my follow-up question is always, how did he get you?
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Well, what does that mean? Yeah.
How did he get me? What does that mean? Well, I was just in a season of life, and I was always been kind of like the nice guy, right? So I didn't have to go through having my life crumble apart in order to, as a lot of people say, find God, or for me to come to God. That happened afterwards.
Yeah.
And but I was just in a season of life where my heart was I was searching. I really was. And through a friend, I ended up hearing about this Jesus, and who I'd always heard about as a child, being raised in a Catholic environment, but not really devout. And so, as I got into my teens and early 20s, I just kind of wandered away from that. But when I was in my mid-20s, through a friend, started hearing more about the lights going out. See, I talked to you about this. So what do you want to do right now? We have audio going. Should we just press pause for a second?
Yeah, no, we don't even have to pause. I can just edit this part out.
Okay.
I can leave it in the podcast.
I'm not sure when the light's going to come back on. Apparently, somebody didn't pay the bills. It might stay off. So are you okay with just audio?
Yeah, if anything, I'm going to cut this part out.
Anyhow, so
show business, everyone.
Yeah. Technical difficulties are always fun. So I was just in a season in life where I was very open, and I was working a retail job and met another guy who was working there, and we were doing the stockroom stuff, and just started having conversations, and seeds were planted at that point, and it was seeds were planted. I think that's a real important part of the journey. Now as a Christian, my role is not to try to figure out what's going on in somebody's life and say, you need to understand all this right now. Right. My job is to plant seeds. Yeah. And that's what happened to me at that time, probably for 3 or 4 years, maybe more than that. There were seeds being planted by one person, maybe another couple, 2 or 3 people. And then in the right season, my eyes were opened up. I can't say anything except that was miraculous. That all of a sudden, just bam, I understood and trusted that, wow, God is real, number one, but Jesus made sense to me. Yeah. There's a whole backstory to that, but I got involved with apologetics, which is the learning the logical side of Christianity, which was great, which is actually quite counter to who I am as a person, because I'm very much of a heartfelt person, as you know. But I got really interested in the whole intellectual side of Christianity, and it just made a lot of sense to me. That was after I came to faith, but I needed something to reinforce it. So I spent quite some time reading and listening to that stuff for a while.
That's deep. So you mentioned your friend introduced you to Jesus. Did you have a church that you were a part of early on, or?
Yeah, right. Pretty much right when I had my faith experience, my conversion, if you will. I'm trying not to speak Christianese here. When I came to faith, I immediately got involved, or I didn't get involved. I started attending a church, and by the grace of God, it was a good, solid church with really great teaching. And that was my first 4 years or so, for 4 or 5 years of being a Christian, and I got baptized during that time period as well.
Yeah. So something to kind of touch on, a very common story for the Bay Area is similar for a lot of people in the Bay Area. I grew up a casual Christian, and something I kind of talked about with my experience growing up as a Christian in the Bay Area, it's for me it wasn't easy because I'm surrounded by people who are atheists or very agnostic. And you grew up in Sunnyvale?
Yeah, my hometown. Yeah.
Hometown, and you're still here. What happens to a lot of Christians is when they find God, they have a hard time here.
Yes.
What happened in your life transitioning into becoming a Christian? Did you lose friends or anything like that?
Yeah, my family left me. No, actually, well, my family initially, we laugh about it now, thought I was in a cult. And I wasn't extreme, by quote-unquote extreme by any means, but now they laugh about it because majority of them are in the same cult as me. God used that seed, and my sisters and my mom and other family members have come to Christ. But at the time, when I had my faith experience, I was actually a fashion photographer. So I was not only living in Silicon Valley, but I was in an industry that is known for not being necessarily ethical.
Yeah,
right?
Were you taking pictures of nude people?
Not per se, no. But I was doing fashion photography, and that whole world is based on the external. Now I know I have several friends now that are photographers and love the Lord and are operating in that environment, and models as well, and they're being light in that kind of environment. Like anything else, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. Right, and it's the heart behind it. And I didn't leave that industry because specifically that I was a Christian. Right. I felt that, wow, this is an opportunity for me to shine a different light in a pretty dark industry at the time. So, during that time period when I came to Christ, I was already pretty much like an apple pie kind of photographer. Right. I wasn't going crazy and going out and doing a lot of the stuff that happens in that industry. Yeah. So, in that sense, it was kind of an easy transition for me. Okay.
So you mentioned you left the fashion photography industry. From there, did you right into the style of life you have now, where you're completely devoted to God? And
No. I say my first 10 years of being a professed Christian, I say I was a saved nice guy. Okay. I was attending church, but I wasn't serving. I wasn't giving. I wasn't involved in any sort of small community, no accountability. I wasn't rebelling, but I was a nice guy, but I called myself a Christian. But if you look from the outside in, I was the same nice guy as I was prior to being a Christian, except now I was calling myself a Christian. Right. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so when I'd left the fashion photography industry, and that was primarily financial, I either had to make a decision to move to LA or New York to really pursue that, neither of which I was interested in doing. Yeah. With great respect to people who can do that. Yeah. And I completely shifted gears and got into the high-tech industry as a staffing recruiter. Cool. And learned the trade, and then started running my own business. And there's some turns in my walk with God and in my life during that time is when things actually started blowing apart. Okay.
Do you want to talk about those windy roads? Or?
Yeah, I can mention that if that's helpful.
Absolutely.
Now I look back, and my decisions and my lifestyle at that time and the disaster that came out of it has become an encouragement to others. So, when I mention it to people up front, I share a few aspects. They say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "You know what? I'm not." I mean, at that time, did it suck? Yes, capital S. It was miserable. But I also had a real sense in my soul that God was going to restore it and turn it around into something. And long story very short, I ended up, after several years in that industry, making some really good money during the .com thing. And some of you guys are too young for that.
Not me. I was
it feels
alive
like
and well.
decades ago now it was.
Yeah.
So went from being a starving artist to making ridiculous amounts of money in a short amount of time, and spending it frivolously without any wise financial counsel, and just living a big lifestyle like a lot of people were at that time.
Yeah.
And I got sucked into it. Again, still being a quote-unquote nice guy, but not getting involved in church. And I remember people around me inviting me to be involved with playing on the worship team, because I play bass, or getting involved in a small group, and I just kind of kept pushing that stuff away. And during that time period, I ended up dating and then marrying somebody in the same industry. And in the staffing industry. Yeah.
Okay.
And so combined, we were making really ridiculous amounts of money, but neither of us were in community regularly, and found out right at the beginning of the marriage that there was an affair going on.
Oh.
And so that happened right after 9/11.
Right.
And
bad timing for everything.
Bad timing for everything, yeah. But what I look back at now, let me back up. So moved out a few months later, and then attempt of reconciliation happened, but the behavior just kept happening. And so it was very clear that for whatever reason, she wanted to pursue that other direction. And it was difficult, it was painful. But I look back now through my own experience, and I had my own baggage at the time, and like we all do.
Right.
And but I look at it as when you saw the towers come down.
Yeah.
Right. In New York, my tower A was my financial situation, my money, my stuff, and my tower B was my relationship. Those were both idols in my life. Those were both things, in a sense, that for layman's terms, non-Christian terms, those are things I worshipped.
Yeah.
In a sense, right? And a lot of people do this, and we all get caught up in it. But I did that out of my own insecurity. I found a great amount of security and identity in my achievement, my stuff, and in a relationship. Even prior to being married, it wasn't healthy. Yeah,
everything for you, for just illustration sense, hit a wall for me. And how did you recover from that?
Slowly.
Yeah.
When you put all of your stock in that, and then you realize, wow, my identity is really broken. It's in the wrong stuff, in the wrong person. It's a revelation, but it's also very painful when you realize that. But I was fortunate enough at that time to have just started connecting with some other guys of faith, and they came around me very quickly, and I had friends come around me, and I ended up, of course, losing the home that we had, and then living, after couch surfing for a while, living with a family member, which was wonderful, about a year long, as I kind of got reestablished. And I had to go into the trades, just take a completely different direction, because everything in tech in 2002 was just gone. It was in the toilet, right? So I had to start over again. But I was in a very depressed state. I was on depression medication and anti-anxiety medication. And my counselor was like, dude, surprising you haven't jumped off a bridge. Praise God for you, and the people that have come around you, because he knew all the details of everything. It was bad. It was a dark season. And, when I look back, I remember a specific time during that season, probably about 6 or 8 months in, that I realized that, wow, there's been so many times in my past, even as a Christian, where I was broken or hurt, and I had this image of a clay pot that was me. And I would glue it all back together with my crazy glue, and it still looks pretty darn ugly, right? You ever try to glue something like that together, and the pieces never line up?
Never.
Right? And the glue is sticking out and oozing and dripping, and well, it's kind of held together.
You're always missing a few pieces.
You're always missing. Yeah, I'm missing a few pieces, all right. Yeah. But, so I went through that whole process, and I look back and go, man, I did that a lot in my life, and I really sensed that God was saying, just take a deep breath. Yeah, you went through a broken season here, but you are broken. But be okay with that. face your own brokenness. And I'm not even talking about the brokenness of the adulterous relationship and the divorce. Go before that. Go look at your brokenness as to why you were even in this relationship in the first place, because it was unhealthy prior to being married.
Right.
And really look at your heart. And so God revealed some things to me, my insecurities, my codependency, and my brokenness, and a lot of where that came from. And so instead of trying to fix myself, I really felt like the Lord was saying, don't wallow in it, but just rest here and sit under my hand, sit under the pressure of my love. It might feel a little heavy because you're going to look at some things in your heart, but wait. And I really felt like during that season that not only was I broken, but God allowed me to be crushed. So if you think about clay, a clay pot, being shattered or broken, okay, that's one thing. But having that clay pot crushed into small pieces, but even beyond crushed, to pulverized into powder again. And then, well, that seems pretty sandy. I said, yeah, but I cried a lot. And I really believe Jesus wept with me. And his tears and my tears took that dust from that pot, and he can make it into clay again.
Yeah.
Right? And he watered it. You know, God's word is called water for our soul, right? So he watered that, and in a sense was able to mix that back together and reform me instead of me fixing myself. During that broken season of just being totally pulverized and crushed, God was able to put me on the potter's wheel, so to speak, and reform me. But I had to be willing to sit there with him and not try to numb myself by dating right away or pursuing this or pursuing that and hanging my jacket on a bunch of false hooks of self-reliance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You had to let go.
Yeah.
I hear this a lot with Christians, and I will openly admit, even myself, it's still kind of struggle with this in a sense. Is it you're not with God completely until you're like let go of your old self.
Yeah.
And in those times where I feel God is more distant, I feel like, well, yeah, man, I've been spending a lot of time lately with worldly things. I haven't been slowing down to wait for God to be with me, to really pray to God and everything. And it's common. I from just people I've spoken to, I hear it's from my experience. I think it's common with people who grew up in homes like yourself, who you've had a father who was agnostic and a casual family, Christmas, Easter Christians. And if you grew up in a home like that as a casual Christian, and if you're new to Christianity, I understand becoming a full-on give your life to Jesus Christian. That's very intimidating, but the more you resist, the harder it gets, and the more you submit, the easier it gets. And from what I'm hearing from you, you had a long, hard journey of that. But let's talk about the new reformed you.
There you go.
The new pot. So you made it out of this really hard season, and from who I see from you now, you're a great inspiration to a lot of people, including myself. So how did you start running with God? How did you start really changing the way you live, man?
Yeah, well, a big part of it for me was when I realized I am in trouble. I really cried out, and I, out of pure selfish motivation initially, I started a men's group. Yes, I started a men's group, and all that means is, for people who are not Christians listening to this, it's not a bunch of guys hanging, holding hands and crying together, although we did cry from time to time because there was some pain, but just a group of guys hanging out on a weekly basis, and we made a commitment to grow personally and spiritually, and we invited various different guys different places in life to be involved in that, and I initiated that. And I had never done this before, and I was just jacked up. I just needed some brothers around me, and honestly, I needed some guys I could cry in front of. And it was three of us guys initially, a guy named John, and a guy named Scott, and then myself. And then John or Scott said, "Yeah, you got to meet this guy, John. John had gone through what you went through about a year and a half ago."
Wow.
So I met John. I'm like, "Oh, you're my friend." And he could relate. And he went to the same situation where his spouse had committed adultery. And so he was encouraging me and helped build me up. And that group grew to about 6, 7, 8 guys on and off over about 5 years. It fluctuated, but we would meet once a week, almost every week for 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And during that time period, there were 4 out of 7 guys that had spouses that had committed adultery. And one of them, it happened while we were a group. And that couple, the woman who went wayward, was involved in the church with her husband too. So it doesn't just happen outside the church environment. But what I learned during that time period was that God had given me a gift to minister, encourage, teach other brothers, and to lead, if you will. I discovered a leadership gift, and I discovered a teaching gift. Now, had I not been through what I'd been through, I would never hit a point of desperation where I stepped into such unknown waters and discovered these things. And long story short, that is really where God started planting the seeds for me to want to serve in vocational ministry full time.
Yeah.
That seed was planted at that point in my life.
Yeah, and that testimony is common in the sense that I always hear about the people most on fire are the people who have been broken the most in their lives. People who work the hardest in recovery centers are people who've recovered themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been to a couple of your meetings or your life groups. You definitely connect with your membership. It's rare to see in a small group environment so many tears when you, because you're just doing like from what I saw from you were just doing this message. I forget what passage, Jesus taking the yoke. Yeah, and everyone in maybe 75% of the people sitting, 20 people or so watching you do this message are tearing up. So God definitely comes within you and speaks through you when you do that, and that's a huge gift. And now you're not officially a pastor.
Well, I think once a pastor, always a pastor. In the journey. In this journey, I started that stuff with the men's, just ministering to the brothers, and then I, as a lay leader, meaning volunteer, ended up again naively stepping into a role that I didn't realize was going to blow open. At a local church here about 10 years ago, where I started heading up men's ministry, and I had an amazing team of guys around me to encourage me, and I just said, hey, I'll help put together, organize a retreat, and that led from one thing to another, and we ended up doing men's conferences here in the Bay Area, running a couple conferences that had 500, 600, 700 guys from 15, 20 different churches. We just had a vision to unite the men in the South Bay here, and several men's ministries at different churches were birthed out of that. And again, God was just taken, when I was faithful with a little, He created more. And it wasn't my ability, and as much as it was Him just moving through my availability in that. And through that stream, I ended up getting very curious about church planting and seeing that's basically church terms for a church startup, right? If somebody doesn't know, and got involved in that stream of ministry, learning from guys who've done that, and then God took me from that into a role as associate pastor. It was my first time I had moved out of the Bay Area, and I really felt that I was being called to serve my way into vocational ministry. Some of it was bandwidth, didn't have time to go to seminary. Some of it was money, but some of it was really much. I was really feeling God was calling me a certain direction to be an encouragement to other guys who are in the workplace who have a gift like this, whatever that might look like, to serve your way into a role where God might open up a vocational door. And so that's when I moved out of the Bay Area to go on staff with the church.
To kind of rephrase what I said earlier, I mentioned about you being a pastor or not, because I actually didn't know you were doing seminary work, but you are pastoring at churches, and so now I didn't know you were officially an associate pastor now at a church. Oh,
I was.
Oh,
yes.
you were. Okay.
Yeah, when I moved out of town.
You moved out. When did you move out of town and back?
Well, that was before we met.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I'm not tracking. I'm
okay.
tracking now. I'm on
All right.
page with you.
Yeah, as I went through this whole church planting movement, if you will, here through different contacts, I ended up on staff out of the Bay Area at a church. Loved it and really felt like I was in the pocket. And through some financial situations and stuff up there, it's a smaller town, ended up back here. But to your earlier question, I think, pastor doesn't necessarily mean vocational.
Right.
You've got if someone's got a shepherd heart, or a heart to serve, or a heart for hospitality, you're going to do that in whatever realm it's in front of you. You can't not do it.
Right.
You can't not, because it's a response out of who you've become in Christ. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, this is something that recurring theme on this podcast thus far is God puts a calling on our hearts, and we don't wait for a title to do it. We just do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're another excellent example of someone who just does what God calls them to do. And outside of being associate pastor at a church and leading all these men's ministry efforts, you've crossed over into the realm of missionary work.
Yeah.
So now you have a lot on your plate, is as expected when someone who listens so intently to
Or I'm just spiritually ADD.
Hey, it's very common for pastors to be ADD.
Squirrel.
Yeah, squirrel.
Yeah.
What is that? But you know what, though? I mean, we're talking about that before. All the best leaders in the world have had some sort of learning disability.
Yeah. Some of us are just really good at it.
Some of us are just really good at it. No, and I just think that having some sort of attention disability or learning disability makes us adapt into a way we can work more efficiently in the world than someone who can learn books and math and English quickly. So we just had to get better at other stuff, like being a great leader and doing all that stuff. So you're crossed to the realm of missionary work. And I nutshelled you earlier, but if you're comfortable sharing, what is currently on your plate right now?
Crack open the nutshell.
Crack open that nutshell.
All right. Well, so back in 2004, as I was doing the men's ministry, I also had an opportunity to go on my first mission trip. And I'll be forever grateful to Westgate Church here. It's an amazing church in the Bay Area here. And I was invited to go to the Philippines. And God messed me up. And people ask, well, how was the trip? And now I've been to Philippines and Cuba and Ethiopia, and my answer now is it ruined my life. And because it took what God was already lit up and just consuming fire with it. And that was kind of the thing that was the ultimate catalyst to push me forward. So since then, I've had the opportunity to go to Ethiopia every year since 2011. And my first time going there was with South Bay Church, which you attend, and love those guys. They've done an amazing work here in the Bay Area. Whenever somebody comes here to plant a church from out of state, they are nuts, but they're nuts for God. Yeah. Because this is a challenging place to do it. So I went there in 2011 for the first time, and then subsequent years with them. And then a couple years ago, really start feeling that like God was stirring my spirit to start an organization that could increase our focus there a little bit, because with the local church, understandably, there's a limit to what they're able to do because they've got so many other things going on, right? And they don't have the capacity to necessarily expand on that without creating problems with other ministries, and so I really felt like we're being called to step in and dive into the waters in Ethiopia. So that started stirring a couple years ago, and it was confirmed about a year and a half ago that it's time. So we developed, through a lot of prayer and fasting and encouragement from friends, and jump out of the boat and started an organization called Arukah Global. and that's Arukah Global.
Yeah.
.com if you want to look.
Yeah, Arukah.com.
ArukahGlobal.com.
ArukahGlobal.com.
Yeah, and Arukah is actually a beautiful word that comes out of Jeremiah 33:6, where it talks about God restoring Israel after it's been just decimated. And it's this word. It's a word that it's a holistic healing. It's mind, body, soul, spirit, even provisional healing. It's a beautiful, beautiful word, and it's really our heart for where we're serving in Ethiopia right now. And we're thinking that eventually God will open up doors to serve in other areas, other countries. We've had some people tap on our shoulders, but we're not ready for that yet because we're a new organization.
But I know the answer to this one, but I think our audience would love to know why focus on Ethiopia for your the beginning of your focus for your organization.
Yeah, well, if anybody's going to start a ministry focused on a particular area, they've got to really have a heart for it. And because if you don't, you're going to get frustrated, and then you're going to quit. You can't be the bottle rocket. Woo! I'm all fired up, and then you're just going to fizzle out. So there's got to be something that really gets you. And for me, it was the kids. It was the kids in Ethiopia. And I'm assuming that's the story you want me to share.
If
briefly.
you want, it's up to you.
So I went initially to Ethiopia, a town called Nazareth, Ethiopia, with Andy and Felipe, the two pastors at South Bay Church in 2011. And I went as the team photographer and film guy. And I'd never been there before. It was a very short trip. It's only 5-6 days, which I would not recommend going to Africa for 5 or 6 days. But it's just the way the trip was set up. It was an explore trip just for us to kind of check out a partnership out there. And at that time, South Bay had, they were considering or looking to partner with Compassion International, which is an incredible organization that helps impoverished children get empowered to step out of poverty. And the objective was to have South Bay Church start sponsoring children from that specific area and from that specific community in Ethiopia. So my job was to capture photo and video, then we'd come back and show it to the church and share a story. Hey, look, folks, this is the community that we're going to serve in, and here's a whole bunch of kids, packets, little profiles of children, then you guys could sponsor them for $38 a month. So that was the intent. And in our final day there in country, we went to the church service with a local church there in Ethiopia. And we've since developed wonderful, deep friendships with them there. It's just, they're like family. It's been remarkable. And during the church service, I was standing outside the building at one point, taking some photos and some video, and which was actually kind of good because they're 3-hour-long services there. So I had license to get up and walk around because I had the camera. So I was extra happy to have the camera at that point. And so I was standing outside the building for a few minutes, and there was this little 4-year-old girl standing behind her mom, peeking out at me, and she's waving and doing the peekaboo thing, pretty much. But she was really light-skinned, and I look at, I'm assuming that's her mom. Her mom looked dark, Ethiopian, and she was like my skin color, really light. And I asked the Ethiopian man next to me first if that was her daughter, and he said, yeah. I said, well, what's the situation there? And he says, well, her dad left the mother when she was 3 months pregnant, and the little girl's never met her father. I thought, okay, well, that would explain why she looks like that. And he was from the Ukraine, right? Did I say that already?
Yeah, but it's fun.
So redundancy is good. So anyway, we do this little peekaboo thing. We continue it, and she runs up to me actually a couple times and tugs on my arm, and she laughs, and she runs behind mom. And she's like waiting for me to respond. And after the second time of her doing this, the man leans over to me and he says, that girl there, he says, she thinks you're her father.
Wow.
And it ruined me. And my eyes are welling up. I was already tired and bloodshot and lack of sleep, but so you're already heightened emotionally at that point. Seeing all the stuff, the poverty and everything else around. But then the joy and worship time during service was amazing. But now my eyes just filled with tears, and I actually had to go walk it off. And 5 minutes later, I came back, church had got out, and they were gone. Never saw them again. Yeah. But I'd shared that story for the next couple of days while we were waiting for flight delays to leave, to come back home. I shared that story multiple times and how much it had impacted my heart. I'm like, man, I want to sponsor a child in this country.
Yeah.
Shared that story over and over again after I got back. And it was about 8 weeks later when we were going to have at the church what's called Compassion Sunday, where we present the photos and the video, get the congregation excited about sponsoring kids, and we'd have a bunch of children available to sponsor. So about 8 weeks later, we've got about 60 kids ready to be sponsored, show the photos and the video, and I'm ready to sponsor a child. So I'm going through this stack of paper pamphlets. So I'm going through this stack of profiles for children that are available to be sponsored. And I'm flipping through the stack, and guess who I come across? The same little girl who thought I was her dad. So 8 weeks.
I just can't believe that.
8,000 miles away, 8 weeks later, same little girl. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. So I had to pray about it. No, I'm just kidding. I sponsored her. Right away. And started writing letters to her. And then the next year, 2012, I got to meet her face-to-face officially. And then every year since, I've also sponsored another little one. And then my fiance now, Kimberly, she's now sponsored a little child in that community, and by God's grace, He's allowed me to facilitate sponsorship of probably about 120 or 130 kids in Ethiopia. It's just joy, because it turns those kids' lives upside down. Just in the same way God turned my life upside down. Yeah. Now we get to do the same thing for others.
Yeah, absolutely. That story still trips me out when I hear it, because what are the odds? Those packets don't go to one place; they get spread around.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm certain the people who assembled the packets weren't following you and saying, "This is the guy we got it." This is completely God designed.
Yeah.
Not coincidence. God designed destiny for you to sponsor her and go back and really be, in a way, her father.
Yeah. So what's happened out of that, what's transpired, just consistently going. Not only have I seen her growth spiritually and physically and maturity-wise, but developed amazing friendships there. Mm-hmm. And because, short-term missions, it's not a shot in the arm for us. It shouldn't be. And too often it's used for that.
Yeah.
And it creates a lot of damage, a lot of mistrust from the nationals in those countries when you show up once and then disappear, or show up twice and disappear. Mm-hmm. But consistency not only builds trust with you that they're actually coming back to help and empower, but it also, in my opinion, really shows the consistency of God.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And because I can always bounce it back, and I teach my team members who come with us, look, this is about God's heart transforming our heart, and therefore we can't not be a part of what He's doing elsewhere.
Yeah, and you're a big advocate also for writing letters to your sponsored children, and that's huge too. That speaks right to that consistency. Yeah. In terms of consistency, absolutely, there's a lot of people who are just looking for. We've talked a little bit about this before too, kind of just the good feeling of going instead of the actual getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
That consistency you speak about also speaks to a lot of the other type of work you do. Outside of your starting of a missions organization that has sponsored hundreds of children in Ethiopia, and your close work with Compassion International, as well as, your own organization called Arukah. You're also on the home front, working in an organization called Cityteam.
Yeah.
Working to combat homelessness.
Right.
How did you get connected with that? Because when I met you, you were on fire for everything you do. And
flames coming out everywhere.
Out of your ears and out of your nose like a bull. But one of your big things was mission trips. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I know, you're in this huge position at Cityteam. So how did that connection happen?
Yeah, well, so first, the missions, the global missions thing, Arukah Global came out of, for me personally, a necessity of responding to God. I would have been absolutely, belligerently shaking my fist saying, forget it, God, had I not launched that organization, because I really felt He was calling me specifically to that. And while this ties into Cityteam here, every time I'd bring a group there, whether it was with my previous church or now with Arukah, one of the things I share with the local church even with pastors now who are considering being partners with Arukah Global, is that I really believe that global missions is a catalyst for local missions. Now, what I mean by that is that we live in Silicon Valley here in such a pasteurized, sterilized, homogenized environment. Everything's pretty and clean that we think it is because of how people view Silicon Valley. It's all technology. Everybody's rich, and we know better. But one of the greatest things somebody can do who lives here, born and raised here especially, is to pick themselves up and get out of here for a week or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe do a little longer, and immerse themselves into a so-called developing country and get around extreme poverty. Not only to see a different world, to see, wow, people live like this, it's not all like what we think it is, but also to see the joy that these people have when they don't have, quote unquote, anything physically compared to what we have.
Right.
And to look at the Christians in those countries and to see the overflowing, overwhelming joy and satisfaction that they have in knowing Jesus, in comparison to how we just kind of flippantly often go around, Jesus, I'll just add him on to my life as a Christian. When we go overseas and see there's a desperation because these countries aren't materially driven. They are spiritually driven. They might have 50,000 different gods or whatever, but when they finally meet Jesus, they go, wow, this is the one that I've been looking for.
Yeah.
This is the one that's healed my soul, healed my heart, it's healed my family. And when things get tough, and they will, because just because you know Jesus doesn't make everything perfect, but there's a peace that they have. And there's a joy when you witness them during worship, meaning when they're singing in church. They're singing, they're dancing, they're clapping. They can't sit still because they're responding to one that's responded to them with such love and grace. They can't help but respond back in jubilation.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So global missions is a catalyst for local missions in the sense that it wakes us up to the realities of the rest of the world, but it also, as Christians in the Bay Area here, for me personally and those who've come with us, it's broken their hearts for the local church here too. It's like you want to shake and wake them up.
Yeah.
It's not a criticism, but you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Right? So what I've seen happen with teams that have gone overseas and come back, they're messed up. It shakes them up. But I also encourage them to say, look, don't get too ticked off at everything here because you tend to be cynical when you come back.
Yeah.
Direct that energy locally. How can you serve those who are hurting here locally, right? And it might be the person in the cubicle next to you who's driving the Tesla. Guarantee you, they're probably hurting.
Yeah.
Get to know them, understand their story, and don't try to convert them. Get to know them as a human being.
Yeah.
And let God do the work in their hearts, right? So the whole idea of global missions is a catalyst for local missions is something that with Arukah Global we have as a core value. Now, when the opportunity came for Cityteam, I was looking at them for another role because Arukah is not a full-time thing. Well, it could be, but I'm not funded for it yet.
Yeah, it's building.
It's building. But I do it on the side, but there's enough time and effort going in. It could be almost a full-time deal, but I have to also have a job. And by God's grace, after I moved back to the Bay Area from pastoring up in the Sierra Foothills, this door opened up at Cityteam. And my role at Cityteam is to help expose people to what's going on some of the darker side here of Silicon Valley, on some of the painful side, the side that people don't want to see. There's a lot of people living in poverty here in the Bay Area. There's a lot of homelessness here.
Yep.
And there's a lot of addiction for drugs, alcohol, and other things that go along with that. And one of the reasons that has really stirred my heart and I resonated with what Cityteam is doing to help combat this stuff around the Bay Area. So I was born and raised in Sunnyvale, right, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, if I were to see somebody homeless, it was in San Francisco or St. James Park in downtown San Jose. There wasn't any of it in between. But now, as you know, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And just this afternoon, before I got back to the house here, I saw a man in the corner up by Santana Row, of all places. And I was in the right 2 lanes over on the turn lane, so I couldn't get over to him, and I was 5 minutes late for a meeting. And I went back to try to catch him afterwards, but he was gone. But clean-cut older guy, probably 70 years old, former vet, and he had a walker. And I sat there at the stoplight with tears in my eyes. I just felt like I've got to do something with this. And there's so much of that now, and Cityteam addresses that in a very tangible way.
Right. Can you just nutshell how Cityteam addresses it? Because they're a wonderful organization.
Yeah, they are. It's amazing.
Yeah, they do amazing work, extremely effective, gospel-driven. But can you nutshell that any better than me in terms of how they operate?
Yeah. Just in San Jose, well, let me snapshot. There's San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, Portland, and Philadelphia. So just focusing in San Jose here, we've got what's called community services, and that's a big warehouse center where we take food in and clothing and other supplies for families, and it gets distributed. So families who are in need can come pick up. Now, they're all registered, so they can't abuse it necessarily, right? So everything's accounted for, but it's for families that are in need of food and clothing and everything else. That's one aspect. And then there's the other aspect of the homeless shelter. We've got a homeless shelter right now for men. We're hoping to have one for women and children because we can't put them together.
Right.
But we started as a soup kitchen and homeless shelter in 1957 in downtown San Jose. So for men coming out of the war and stuff. So that's still there as our foundation. But we have about 58 beds available for men on a regular basis that are homeless. Involved with that is we also have a kitchen, the soup kitchen, if you will. It's much more than soup. We serve 500-600 meals there a day. It's amazing, both to our homeless guests and the men who are in the recovery program. We house about 60 to 70 men going through addiction recovery. It's a 1-year in-house program. And those men are empowered to run the whole center. They run the kitchen, and they do cleanup and everything else. And they actually help serve the homeless.
Right.
So they're getting dignity in the process. And we have a whole program where the men and also the women in the 2 women's homes who are going through recovery get re-educated. We've got a learning center. Volunteers come in there and help teach them computer skills and how to do their resumes, and they get skilled up to go back out into the world and be a productive citizen. And they don't go until they have a job, until they're ready. We have 2 women's recovery homes. One is called House of Grace, and it's an apartment-style place, and that's for women going through recovery who aren't pregnant. There's usually 5, 6, 7 kids living there at any given time, from like 1-year-old up to about 5 or 6. Amazing program. And then there's Heritage Home, which is an old Victorian home near downtown San Jose that is for pregnant women going through recovery. And you talk about a grace bomb.
Right.
And so it's prenatal, postnatal care. They take care of these ladies, get them up on their feet. They help them take care of their babies. Again, a year-long program. Get them clean and sober, and tell them that they're loved by God, show them that they're loved by God,
Right.
Help them get back on their feet and get them back out in the workforce again.
Yeah, and something that I think should be mentioned, and something that's a little upsetting to me, and just par for the course for anything that's gospel-based, is Cityteam does not get a cent from the government.
Right.
Because they're gospel-based. And sadly, gospel-based programs are much more successful than government-run programs. So how does Cityteam keep the lights on for?
Yeah, everything is privately funded, man.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. From churches, corporations will give, individuals will give. It's all done through private donations. It's remarkable to me because I see the impact and what we do there. It's humbling to be a part of it,
Right.
but to see what actually unfolds based on donations from individuals and time. We run on volunteers and donations. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, huge group of volunteers that are consistently serving over there. Just for our audience, if they wanted to contribute to Cityteam, cityteam.org.
Yeah, you can go to cityteam.org and press the donate button.
yeah, it's that easy.
Yep.
Yeah, and in terms of that too, you mentioned you have a warehouse where you distribute clothing and food. And on the website it says if you guys have some stuff, you can bring it in, and the address is there and everything.
Yeah.
Just for
Yep.
our audience sake.
Absolutely.
Gospel-based recovery centers and gospel-based programs like that at Cityteam mentioned are much more successful. Why do you think that is? Like, you guys can look the stats up yourself.
Yeah.
But Cityteam is one of the most successful organizations that help the homeless in the nation. And personally, just from what I've seen over their testimony, met a gentleman there who life just hit a really tall wall and he had to climb out of it. But 6 months later, after being with Cityteam and making it through the recovery program, ended up becoming a teacher there. And actually, when I met him, he had no teeth left, and now he has a full set of teeth. Because Cityteam also offers dental.
All volunteers.
All volunteers doing that. So what do you think is the difference? Because I've heard countless stories at Cityteam of people who completely U-turn their lives.
Yeah. So a typical recovery program out there, and there's a lot of very good ones. Again, I don't know the exact stats because they're arguable, but if you have 10 to 15% of people not relapsing, you're doing really good. And we're upwards of 60, 70, some people say 80%.
Yeah. And
it's amazing. And recovery is measured in various areas, but some of the things we look at is this person staying sober, obviously. Are they holding down a job? Number two. And are they in regular community, right? Healthy community, because those are the things that are a lot of indicators. Those are some of the first things that fall apart when you're an addict, right? So your question, what makes Cityteam have such a high quote-unquote success rate? It is the gospel. It's a transformational aspect of a true living God. Jesus is not a placebo. He's not a positive mental attitude guru. He's not a shot in the arm. It is a transformation that truly happens at a soul level. I've experienced that, and nobody can convince me otherwise. And I can talk to pundits and argue this and argue that, whatever it is. I've seen changes for myself. I've seen it in others. There's people who have gone through various programs, even at Cityteam, have had it not work out, and then they get involved in this, and they build a relationship with the living God, Jesus, and there's a true transformation that happens. And there's things that we can muscle up and muster up in life. We can pull up our bootstraps and try harder and do better at.
Right.
Absolutely. There's discipline. There's a time when discipline has got to be flat out discipline.
Right.
But at a certain point, you're going to be wary of pure discipline. There has to be transformation. So when transformation happens, whether it's with sobriety, whether it's with relational stuff, whether it's whatever, when transformation happens, that's how you have permanent change.
Yeah, I agree. And that speaks to people who are struggling with either drugs or the challenges of homelessness, and that also speaks to people like you and me, the average man. We're all broken, and we all require some form of transformation. Thanks to, in a lot of ways, meeting people like yourself, I've taken on trying to help those who are homeless as well.
It's been really cool to see your story unfold, bro. It's been really, really cool. Very encouraging.
It's still unfolding. It's been great
continue.
Being involved in it. But I will say something that has had a tremendous effect on the way I operate, how I handle my efforts, is you said effective homeless outreach isn't like going to Disneyland. It's not just handing food and saying, okay, have a good day, bye. Next person, have a good day. Next person, have a good day. And the way I've broken it down, it's kind of like that's just step one of the different phases of humanitarianism. Everyone wants to. There's a lot. I'm not naming names or I'm not pointing fingers, but there's a lot of people out there and a lot of churches out there who all they do is phase one. That's all they do is just hand them food. Okay, get on with it. Don't want to see you again. And it speaks to something you talked about earlier too. Consistency is extremely important. Whether it be sending letters to children in Africa, or meeting the same homeless people over and over again and building a relationship. Because I agree, 100% true transformation does not happen with just small interactions. It happens with investment. And if you're listening now, and if you're involved with outreach efforts, whether it be missionary or homeless outreach stateside, from personal experience, I can tell you it's not easy. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's very challenging.
It's very challenging, but can't do it alone. Like, God is essential to be there with you, because God is where transformation is, and you really got to pray for your people. Got to pray for your efforts, and yeah, like if I were just to go the easy route and just to go with the, as you said, Disneyland effort, it would be easy for me just to say, yeah, here's a shirt, all right, next guy, here's a food, next guy. Now I have to, and I think everyone should think about it, and you want to focus on getting them to from phase 1, which is feeding, to phase 2, which is being able to fish and catch your own fish, and then phase 3, give them a fishing rod. Phase 4, follow up with them. But I have to stop, otherwise I'm going to go all night.
It's easy when you're passionate about it.
Oh man, I'm on fire about it. But something I do want to kind of get to is you've been in a transformative time for a while. God's been using a lot of you, but let's just talk about where you're at now in your life, and where you see yourself in the future.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, first, I want to say that.
Yeah, sure.
Establishing Arukah Global and also working with Cityteam, I think it's important that people understand what is like the motive behind that, really. And this is something I share when I talk with individuals, whenever I have an opportunity to preach at a church or a university. When I peel away Christianity, and hopefully this is encouraging those who are Christians and those who are just checking out this Christianity thing, because it's not that complicated. But the doors God's opened for me to serve really are opportunities for me to respond to something. And this is what it is, and this is my prayer for people. It's my prayer is that your life as a Christ follower is a response to Jesus' loving and gracious response to you. Your life as a Christ follower ought to be a response to Jesus' loving and gracious response to you. You peel away all the do's and don'ts and all the things that we think are rules, which they're not. It's a response. I can't not respond a certain way anymore. I'm not perfect. I'm going to blow it. I'm going to mess up. But so often we'll hear like, well, yeah, as a Christian, you don't do stuff or not do stuff because you're supposed to. You do it because you get to.
Yeah.
And that's true. But I'll take it even past that. It's not even because I'm not supposed to, not because I get to. I can't not. I can't not go to Ethiopia. I can't not go and share what God's done in my heart. I can't not do it. It'll keep me awake at night. It'll drive me nuts. I can't not invite people and churches into this world that Cityteam's been immersed into. I can't not do it. That's not about me being good or great. It's about what God's done in me, and I can't shut up about it. And that sounds Christianese, but that's just reality. Because I tell you what, when it gets hard putting together an organization to go overseas to raise funds, what's going to keep me going if it's just me mustering up my motivation?
Yeah.
Right? Or what's going to keep me going at Cityteam when I get frustrated with different situations and I hit a wall with ministry there? It's going to be the love for the people, of course, but it's going to be responding to what God's done in my heart. And then I go, man, I want other people to experience this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So moving forward, that's my mantra in life. My heart's desire is I continue to live in response to Jesus' loving and gracious response to me. And so part of my story is watching God redeem the mess I've made in my life and the mess that's happened. And part of that is getting married in June I'm not sure if that's what you were alluding to in this process, but
it's part of it. Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
And to encourage singles, I've been single for quite some time, and I've been serving in the process, and which kept me out of trouble, but it kept me focused on what's important, right? And I was praying, Lord, I want to run towards you with somebody who's already running towards you. Right. I don't want to drag somebody in kicking and screaming. And I've got a heart for singles. That's a whole other conversation. But I see friends who are professed followers of Christ who are single making some really hard, bad decisions. It's just going to be a train wreck. And my heart breaks for them. And so my hope is that as my life comes together with my soon-to-be bride, Kimberly, that her and I have got similar stories previously, and that God will use us to be an encouragement to other singles, both as we serve in Ethiopia, as she comes and volunteers at Cityteam, as we move forward in all of our brokenness and just display the grace of God. That's really what our heart's desire is, that we can be an encouragement to those who know Jesus, and an encouragement and not a deterrent to those who don't know him.
Right.
Because we're not freaky Christians. We're just broken, messed up people who just happen to know this Jesus because we've had an experience with him. Yeah. Not because we've read about him. Yeah. It's real. Yeah. And so looking forward, that's our heart's desire. And what will that look like? We don't know. But we know that part. We know the part that we want our marriage and our life together to be a response to Jesus' gracious and loving response to us.
Yeah, that speaks very loudly to something. I saw a meme recently of someone with their nose deep in the Bible, so deep that the Bible's covering their face. Yeah. And they're walking right by some people on the street. Yeah. And basically the meaning of the meme behind it was you can fill your mind with as many words as you want, but if you don't open your heart to God, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And that's absolutely true, and I think God has definitely leaped into your heart, and you're definitely leading a very God-driven life, and not only by doing so, helping people all over the world, but also inspiring those around you. And I'd like to take a moment to thank you for your continued inspiration in terms of just your attitude. You have a real gung-ho attitude about it, but a real supportive attitude as well, because you know the people around you are also walking the walk, are in it too, and you just put your arms around them and say, come on, let's go.
Well, you know what, bro? It's because I've learned that. Yeah. And you've been a great encouragement to me. And this is not a back and forth because I'm supposed to. I mean, you have been encouraging since we've met from day one, but I've had so many friends and pastors come around and example that for me, and held me up when I was a broken mess, and continue to hold me up when I'm a mess, because I still am. I'm never going to not be. It's just hopefully every day gets a little bit better. And, we reflect often those who we've been around. Hopefully it's Jesus, but there's a lot of human beings that Jesus manifests in. And that's the reality. He's not going to appear in a cloud necessarily around you and I. Jesus appears, manifests in the body of Christ and other believers, and that's where we learn to encourage. Yeah. We have examples of. I've got great men in my life that are incredible examples of grace and of humility and being able to speak slowly and softly, which I suck at, but I learn, and I'm learning from my fiance Kimberly. And my gosh, it's just humbling. It's amazing. So, hopefully that we both learn to, as we exude that, it's because others have sown into us, right?
Yeah. No, that's it's been incredible. This journey these past 4 or 5 years, before I will close, I really want to mention a big part of my transformation was actually working with you, because one of my first big projects at the church was close to my baptism. Oh, okay. In 2013. Yeah. You were assembling a promotional video for the Ethiopia.
Oh yeah, with our sister Kalani.
Yep. And we spent many nights.
Very late.
Very
Perfect
late.
timing. The lights just went out again.
Talking about nighttime. Sorry.
Gotta love that circuit in here, man.
Yeah, it's okay.
Perfect.
It's all right. So we spent, many nights for 2 weeks.
It was a bromance.
It's a bromance. We were there
Absolutely.
till 2, 3 in the morning.
Never been the same.
But what we were doing, we were editing the video, looking
Yeah.
at footage
Yeah.
of your experience in Ethiopia,
Yeah.
and you were able to tell me a lot of the wonderful stories of your experience there. And just being there with you late at night kind of just opened my eyes to not only what it another great example of what it means to be a Christian and to really live it, but also, hey, look at these people in Ethiopia who have no food often, and sometimes no homes, and they're just on fire for God. And it kind of just reshaped my perspective on the world as extremely valuable for my walk. And I want to let you know that's a enormous part of my walk thus far.
Well, I'm seeing that unfold with your heart for the outreaching to the homeless and all that. And, we are actually putting together our 2016 Ethiopia team as we speak.
I know, here you are with the pitch
February
again.
and March this month. Yeah. So if you're interested in coming.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
I'm always very tempted, and hey, you might snag me one of these days.
Yeah. Or if any of these folks listening in, can I put that out there?
Absolutely, yeah.
We are, by the end of March, we want to have this team solidified. If you're interested in exploring what this might look like, whether you're a Christian or not, it doesn't matter what church you belong to, if you belong to one, we really want to open our doors up. We may end up having 2 teams running parallel this year. But you can go to www.arukahglobal.com. That's ARUKAH global.com, and you'll see in the upper right something about joining our 2016 team. And you can just email us, and we'll send you info. We won't spam you, but it could be a great opportunity for you to see something different and to have your heart touched. So
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're listening past March of 2016, they are always organizing trips.
Yep.
So keep an eye on their website and email him if you have any questions or email the contact on the website. And is there anything else you'd like to plug, Mr. Mark Lewis?
Can I plug anything else? No, man. I'm honestly watching you and your co-worker here, Mike Packin, launch this podcast. It's been really cool to see you guys stepping out in faith and with a heart to reach the community and build bridges, between different communities and such. And I'm just proud of you, man. It's exciting to watch this come together, and look forward to seeing how God uses it to be an encouragement to others.
Yeah, if you hear that, this is one of our first podcasts, so maybe we'll look back and see, like, hey, see, Mark was saying there, huh?
Lights went out several times.
Lights went out. Hey, no, it made for a unique podcast. I think for those of you watching the video, you might not get too bored of the same shot over and over again. If you're listening now, if you haven't yet, please like us on Facebook at Living Christian Podcast, and please follow us on Twitter, Living Christian. And once again, this is Mark Lewis and
Tyler
Weiss.
Weiss.
Yeah, it's Tyler Weiss. That's right, guys. And we'll catch you guys next time. Maybe we'll be seeing Mark Lewis again. I don't know. We'll find out.
Ciao.
Ciao.